I used to believe betrayal would arrive like thunder, doors slamming, shouting, glasses shattering, but when it finally came for me, it slipped in like mist, quiet and cold. The night of the scholarship dinner had begun like a dream. The old estate where it was held rose from the hills like a forgotten palace, its stone walls washed in amber light. Strings of fairy bulbs hung from ancient oaks, glinting on crystal glasses carried by servers in white gloves. Everything smelled of roses and candle wax, and for once I felt as if my hard work had lifted me into another world. Liam's arm was warm around my waist as we walked up the steps. He looked every inch the man he'd promised he'd become. Dark hair combed back, tie the exact shade of my dress, that soft smile meant only for me. I thought it meant only for me. Inside the ballroom, people moved like figures from a painting, donors, professors, alumni whose names had decorated scholarships and buildings for decades. Liam squeezed my fingers. "Tonight is for you," he whispered. "You've earned this." I smiled, even as a flutter of unease stirred beneath my ribs. Ava was there too, my best friend since college orientation. She was on the committee that had organized the event, she said, and she hugged me so tightly I almost believed everything was normal. Her silver gown clung to her like liquid moonlight. I wanted to believe the tremor I felt in her shoulders was excitement. I wanted to ignore how Liam's eyes lingered on her a moment too long. The speeches began. Toasts were raised. Laughter bounced off the chandelier's glass drops. I mingled with professors and potential mentors while Liam drifted between groups, charming them with his easy confidence. Each time I glanced across the room, he was already looking somewhere else. Each time I approached Ava, she found an excuse to move away. Small things, nothing you could hold in your hand, but they began to gather in me like stones in a pocket. By the time the string quartet began its second set, the ballroom air felt too thick. I excused myself to the powder room, leaning over the marble sink as cool water slipped between my fingers. My lipstick was still perfect, my hair still pinned. I stared at my reflection and told myself to breathe. Liam loved me. Ava was my friend. Tonight was about the future, not my fears. When I stepped back into the hall, the music and laughter rushed at me like a wave. And then I saw them. They were standing near the tall windows that opened onto the terrace, framed by curtains the color of spilled wine. Not holding hands, not whispering, kissing. His hand cupped her cheek as though it belonged there. Her fingers curled against his jacket, not pushing him away. For a heartbeat, the world slowed, and the sound of the quartet turned to a dull underwater hum. All I could see was the tilt of his head, the glint of her earrings, the reflection of their faces in the glass. A warmth rose in me so sharp it almost felt like heatstroke. But instead of an eruption, there was a strange stillness. No scream clawed its way up my throat. No glass slipped from my hand. The stillness grew and wrapped itself around me like ice. "You don't owe them a scene," a voice said inside me, calm and clear. "You don't owe them anything at all." I turned before either of them saw me. My heels clicked softly on the parquet floor, each step measured. The crowd swallowed me without a glance. I slipped through a side door that opened into the garden, past a server carrying champagne, past a couple laughing under a marble arch. Outside, the night smelled of wet grass and burning torches. Columns rose like pale ghosts around me, supporting nothing but darkness. The fountain in the center sent up a spray that caught the light like shards of glass. My shadow moved over the gravel path, long and narrow. I didn't stop walking. At the edge of the estate grounds, where the manicured lawn gave way to a small ornamental pond, I took my phone from my clutch. Liam's name glowed on the screen from a message he'd sent minutes earlier. "Where are you? Ava says she needs to talk." I stared at it until the letters blurred, then pressed the power button until the screen went black. I crouched and let the phone slip from my fingers into the water. It vanished with barely a ripple. A breeze stirred the torches. Somewhere behind me, laughter swelled and faded. My heart was beating but my mind felt utterly clear. I had always assumed that if someone betrayed me, I would fight, confront, demand explanations. But standing at the edge of that pond, I felt no desire to fight. Only to disappear. To erase myself from the world they thought they owned. To reclaim the part of me they had never really known. I left the estate on foot, the stones of the driveway crunching under my shoes. The parking lot was full of sleek cars and hired valets, but beyond it a narrow road slipped down the hill toward the train station. I followed it without looking back. The night was cool and smelled faintly of salt from the distant bay. Each step away from the estate felt like stepping out of a costume I hadn't realized I was wearing. By the time I reached the dim glow of the station lights, I was no longer the girl who had walked in with Liam on her arm. A train hissed into the platform. I boarded without checking its destination, settling into a seat by the window. As it pulled away, the estate disappeared behind trees and darkness. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, still in the green dress, hair pinned, lips red, but eyes already elsewhere. Outside, lights blurred into streaks as the train gathered speed. My phone lay at the bottom of the pond, my messages unread, my absence unannounced. Somewhere back there, Liam and Ava would realize I was gone. They might search the rooms, call my name, pretend to be worried. But I wouldn't be there to witness it. I had removed myself from their story. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and closed my eyes. For the first time that night, my breath came easily. No explanations, no scenes, just the quiet power of vanishing. The train carried me deeper into the dark, and I let it, feeling something inside me uncoil and stretch its wings. What had begun as a moment of betrayal was already turning into something else, something I didn't yet have a name for. All I knew was that when they looked for me, they would find only silence, and that silence would begin to work on them long before I ever returned. The inn by the sea smelled of salt, old wood, and lavender cleaner. The paint on the shutters peeled in soft curls, and at night the wind rattled them like a loose drum. I had arrived just before dawn, carrying nothing but a single overnight bag and the kind of exhaustion that feels like a second skin. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She took my cash, handed me a brass key, and told me breakfast was at 7. I told her my name was Evelyn. It was the first time I'd said it aloud, and the falsehood felt strangely comfortable on my tongue. The room itself was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window that opened onto the cliffs. Below, the sea churned and hissed against jagged rocks, sending up sprays of foam that caught the morning light. I sat on the bed, listening to the gulls cry, until sleep took me like a tide pulling me under. The first days passed in a haze. I walked along the beach at dawn when the fishermen were hauling in their nets, heads bent under the weight. I avoided mirrors, avoiding the green dress still folded in my bag like evidence of a life that had ended. In the evenings I sat on the porch of the inn, sipping tea and watching the horizon darken into a line of ink. My old phone lay at the bottom of that pond, but I could feel its ghost buzzing in my hand, messages I would never read, calls I would never answer. On the third day, I walked into a seaside cafe with a chalkboard sign offering, help wanted, and left with a job. The owner, a stocky man named Sal, didn't care about my past, only that I could carry 3 plates at once and show up on time. The cafe became my refuge. In the mornings I served coffee to tourists with cameras slung around their necks, in the afternoons to local artists sketching the waves. The smell of ground beans and warm bread filled my lungs, pushing out the scent of betrayal. My hands learned a new rhythm: pour, wipe, smile. My body began to feel like my own again. At night, though, the silence grew louder. I would lie in bed and imagine the city 2 hours away, my apartment standing dark, Liam pacing outside it. I pictured Ava, silver gown now crumpled in some closet, her expression unreadable as she scrolled through her phone. Did they talk about me? Did they search together or separately? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. And yet, each time I thought of them, a strange flicker passed through me, something between grief and power. A week after I'd arrived, I bought a cheap prepaid phone from a corner shop. Its plastic felt foreign in my hand. When I turned it on, a flood of messages poured in as if they had been waiting at a dam. They were from numbers I didn't recognize but didn't need to. Liam. Ava. The first messages were polite. Where are you? Please call me. The next were frantic. It's not what you think. We need to explain. Please. The last ones were raw. I can't do this without you. Please. I'm losing my mind. Ava had sent only one. Please come back. We need to explain. She hadn't written again. I read them all sitting on a bench facing the ocean, the wind whipping my hair into my face. I didn't reply. I switched the phone off and placed it in my pocket like a stone. The gulls shrieked overhead as if echoing the chaos I had left behind. 2 more days passed. I fell into a rhythm at the cafe, learning the regulars, names, the way the sun shifted across the tables. My face began to tan. I began to sleep through the night. The ache in my chest dulled into something almost like calm. Yet the part of me that had walked out of that ballroom wasn't gone, it was only waiting. On the 10th day, a man in a gray suit appeared at the cafe. He didn't order anything. He stood at the counter, his eyes scanning the room until they found me. "Are you Evelyn?" he asked. His voice was soft but had an edge of formality, like someone used to boardrooms. I nodded. He placed an envelope on the counter. "From Liam," he said, and turned to leave before I could speak. The bell above the door chimed as it closed behind him. For a long time I stared at the envelope. My hands felt strangely steady as I wiped them on my apron and picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Liam's handwriting, my name at the top, then, "I'm sorry. I need to see you. Please." Beneath the note was a photograph. Liam sat on the steps of my apartment building, head in his hands, elbows on his knees, looking like a man undone. Someone had taken it from across the street. The angle made him seem small, almost childlike. I folded the photo and slipped it into my apron. My heart should have raced, it didn't. Instead, a quiet certainty spread through me. The silence I had chosen was working. It was cracking them open from the inside. I had taken nothing from them but my presence, and in that absence their guilt was fermenting into something heavier. That night I walked along the cliffs until the stars came out. The sea glowed faintly with the reflection of the moon. I imagined Liam pacing, calling, staring at the door that would not open. I imagined Ava's silence, her texts drying up, her certainty crumbling. I thought about the girl I had been before the ballroom, the girl who would have confronted them, demanded explanations, wept in the bathroom while music played on the other side of the door. That girl had vanished with my phone into the pond. Whoever I was now, she didn't need their answers. She didn't even need revenge. She only needed the power of choosing when, if ever, she would return. But silence, I knew, was not endless. It was a tide. It came in, it went out. Standing at the edge of the cliff with the wind tangling my hair, I wondered when mine would turn, and what shore it would leave me on. I touched the photograph in my pocket. His face was there, frozen in defeat. For a moment, a flicker of compassion passed through me, but it was faint, like light through thick fog. Then it was gone. In the distance a ship moved across the horizon, its lights blinking like a code. I thought of sending a message back, one line, nothing more. But I didn't. Not yet. The sea roared below, endless and patient. Above, the gulls wheeled and screamed. And in the small room of the inn, my suitcase lay packed, waiting for a decision I hadn't yet made. I turned from the cliff and walked back toward the inn. The town's narrow streets smelled of salt and frying fish. Lamps burned in windows like little hearths. I passed them unnoticed, a ghost with a borrowed name. Behind me the ocean kept beating at the rocks. Ahead of me, somewhere beyond the hills, Liam's world was shrinking. Mine was opening. I could feel it in the way my steps no longer faltered. The night was cool against my skin, and for the first time since that ballroom, I felt fully awake. 2 weeks after the envelope arrived, the town had begun to feel like a borrowed dream. The cafe, the cliffs, the gulls, each detail was already softening at the edges, like a photograph left in the sun. Every night I walked the same path along the sea, but my footsteps had started to echo with something new, a pull back toward the city, toward the life I had stepped out of but not yet closed. My suitcase stayed half-packed on the chair by the bed, its zipper open like a mouth waiting for a final word. I boarded a night bus under a sky scratched with stars. The driver didn't ask my name. The road wound through hills and industrial lots, past billboards and empty warehouses. I wore a hooded coat and sat at the back, the windows rattling as if the bus itself were shivering. In my pocket was a cheap phone with a single unsent message drafted on its screen, "Meet me where it started." I didn't press send yet. I watched my reflection sway in the dark glass and wondered if I still looked like the girl in the green dress, or if she had been washed away by the salt air. When I arrived, the city smelled of rain and exhaust. My old apartment stood just as I had left it, dark windows, dead plants on the balcony. Across the street was a coffee shop that stayed open late. I took a seat at the back, facing the window, and ordered tea. Through the steam rising from the cup I saw him. Liam was pacing the sidewalk in front of my building. His hair was longer now, uncombed. His coat hung from his frame as though it had lost its tailor. He stopped at the door, checked his phone, sat on the steps, stood again. At one point he pressed his hands to his temples as though trying to hold his skull together. He looked nothing like the man who had guided me through the ballroom. In his place was someone hollowed out. I stayed in the coffee shop until closing. He didn't leave. When the barista wiped down the last table and turned off the neon sign, I stepped into the night. I walked past him without a sound, slipping down a side street, my hood low over my eyes. My heart beat steadily. He didn't even notice me. Back in the small room I'd rented under a false name, I opened the draft on my phone. My thumbs hovered over the screen. Then, slowly, I pressed send. Meet me where it started. The reply came almost instantly. When? I typed, tonight, midnight, no more, no less. I switched the phone off. At 11:50, I walked up the gravel path of the estate where the scholarship dinner had been held. The grand building was dark now, its windows black mirrors. Only the garden torches burned, small flames trembling in the wind. The marble columns rose pale and silent, just as they had that night, but without the chatter of donors or the clink of glasses they felt like ruins of another life. My heels clicked softly on the stones as I crossed the terrace. Liam was already there. He stood near the fountain, shoulders hunched against the cold, his phone in his hand as if it were a talisman. When he saw me, he straightened. For a moment he didn't move, as though unsure whether I was real. Then he took a step forward. You're alive, he said hoarsely. I was never dead, I said. Just gone from you. He let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I thought, God, I thought something happened to you. Something did, I said. I saw you. He flinched as if struck. It was a mistake. I didn't. He stopped. The torches crackled in the silence between us. You did, I said quietly. And so did she. He took another step, hands open, palms up like a supplicant. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I lost my job. I can't breathe without you. Please, just, say something. I looked at him. Under the flickering light, he seemed smaller, as though the weight of his guilt had pressed him down. A month ago I would have rushed to him, demanded explanations, offered forgiveness just to stop the pain. But the sea air had scoured that impulse from me. Standing there now, I felt only clarity. This isn't revenge, I said. This is reality. You don't get to betray me and then beg me to heal you. His face crumpled. I love you, he whispered. No, I said. You love the way I make you feel. You love the person you can be when I'm there. But you don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done what you did. He dropped to his knees on the cold stone. His hands covered his face. For a moment, the only sounds were the hiss of the fountain and the flicker of the torches. Please, he said into his palms. I'm collapsing. I stepped closer, just enough so he could see my face when he looked up. This isn't about you collapsing, I said softly. This is about me standing. You taught me something when you kissed her, that I don't need to stay where I'm betrayed. His shoulders shook. Tell me what to do, he said. I'll do anything. Let go, I said. Let go of me. Let go of the man you think you are. Start over, or don't. But you don't get to pull me back into your wreckage. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. The movement was small but final. In his eyes I saw the moment something inside him broke, not his heart, perhaps, but his certainty. He lowered his arm slowly, as if even gravity had become too heavy. I turned and began to walk away. My coat brushed the marble as I passed between the columns. The night air was cold against my skin, but it smelled of freedom. Behind me, his breathing grew ragged, then a low sound, then silence. I didn't look back. As I crossed the lawn toward the road, the torches flickered out one by one. My footsteps on the gravel were steady, carrying me farther with each step from the girl in the green dress, from the man on his knees, from the life that had once felt inevitable. I didn't know exactly where I would go next, the inn by the sea, another town, another borrowed name, but I knew this, I was no longer running. I was choosing. At the edge of the estate I paused and looked up at the sky. The clouds had parted, and the moon hung above like a silver coin. I breathed in deeply, the cold filling my lungs. Somewhere behind me Liam was still kneeling, but the sound of him was lost in the night. The silence I had chosen had finished its work. It hadn't destroyed him, his own choices had. All I had done was leave. All I was doing now was live. I walked down the hill toward the station. The gravel gave way to asphalt, the torches to streetlights. In my pocket the cheap phone was dark. I didn't need it anymore. Ahead of me the road curved toward the horizon, open and unclaimed. I followed it without looking back, my shadow stretching long and clean behind me, until even that disappeared into the dark.